Grandma Mabel's house seemed frozen in time. The windows were covered by yellow curtains that still carried the scent of soap and kerosene lamp smoke. The walls whispered stories, and every piece of furniture seemed to watch visitors with invisible eyes. When her children and grandchildren crossed the door for the first time in years, something changed in the air, as if the house knew its last secret was finally about to be unearthed. Why would such a quiet woman leave an incomplete inventory? And why was every item in the house carefully numbered, as if it were part of a puzzle? The answer lies in Mabel's voice, recorded on old tapes hidden inside a sewing box. She wanted to be heard, but not while she was alive. The inventory was not just about objects, it was about memories she preferred to hide to protect the family, or to avoid breaking herself. Tension started to build right upon arrival. James, the eldest son, wanted to settle everything quickly, sell the house, and split the profits. Ruth, the middle daughter, insisted on strictly following their mother's inventory, which already began to cause friction. Thomas, the youngest, seemed distant, but his restless eyes betrayed that something deeper was stirring inside. The grandchildren were caught between curiosity and discomfort. No one knew exactly why they were urgently summoned, only that Mabel had left clear instructions: everyone must be present. No one touches anything until they hear the first recording. At the end of the first day, after long hours of bitter memories, muffled arguments, and unsettling silences, Ruth found a tape with a label stuck to the bottom of an old china cabinet. When she put it in the player, Mabel's voice echoed through the room, firm, measured, and strangely sweet. "If you're hearing this, it's because I've already said goodbye, but not everything we leave behind is dust. Some things still have life, and others still have something to say." And at that moment, everyone understood that inventory wouldn't just be a sharing of belongings. It would be a sharing of truths. The tape stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than any word Mabel could have spoken. James looked away, pretending to look at the floor, as if searching for something he had dropped. Ruth hugged her arms to her body and sat back in her mother's armchair, as if the closeness to that familiar seat made her stronger. Thomas stayed standing by the door, as if still undecided whether he really wanted to be there. That night, no one slept well. The tape had planted an uncomfortable seed, the feeling that their mother's story was bigger than the children knew. The next morning, Ruth was the first to get up. She returned to the room, examining the numbered tags with a notebook in hand. She crossed out the numbers scattered on shelves and furniture until she found the object, a small porcelain doll with delicate features, but the side of its face marked by a dark circular stain, as if it had been burned. Tea was inside a red wooden box, covered with old fabric, protected like a relic. At the bottom of the box, another cassette tape was labeled "Why I Hid Her." Ruth put it in the player. The siblings approached quietly. The tape began. This doll was named Louise. It was my 8th birthday present. She was white, with blue eyes, unlike me. At the time, I thought that meant she was valuable. Mom said it was expensive, that a woman from church brought her from Atlanta. I loved her more than anything else I ever had. Until that day at school, in 1953. Mabel's voice hesitated for a second. A faint static accompanied her breath. I took the doll to show my teacher. She said Louise was too pretty for a child like me. The other girls laughed. One of them threw my backpack to the floor. When I went to pick it up, a white boy stepped on the doll. And then another came with a match. I stood there, frozen, watching, unable to do anything. The doll hadn't caught fire completely. Only one side of her face was burned. I took her home in secret, wrapped in my coat. I hid her deep in the closet for fear of being punished. But Mom never asked. I think she knew, and thought it best to stay silent. Like we did with everything. James crossed his arms and stepped away from the shelf. Why would she keep this until today, he murmured. Thomas, still motionless, stared at the doll. She didn't keep the doll. She kept the pain. Ruth took the doll out of the box and held it carefully. The burned part was rough, irregular, like skin marked by a scar. The recording continued. I thought about throwing it away many times. But every time I touched the doll, I heard my own voice in that schoolyard. Not outside, inside. Louise reminded me not to forget. That I had the right to remember. Even if no one else wanted to listen. That's why she's there. You think you're just inheriting objects. But each one has something I left because I needed to hide or silence it. And now, you need to listen. The player clicked sharply as the tape ended. One of the grandchildren, Malik, Thomas's son, entered the room. He was 13 years old with eyes too observant for his age. "Who is she?" he asked, looking at the doll. Ruth thought about making something up, but simply said, "She belonged to your great-grandmother. She didn't want anyone to forget what they did to her." Malik approached without touching. "Was she black like me?" Ruth nodded. "Yes." He was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Did she forgive?" None of the three adults answered. James left the room. Ruth put the doll back in the box, as if closing a ritual. Thomas, for the first time, seemed more present than in recent years. I think that question will come back more times than we expect. Later, Ruth found a faded photograph at the bottom of the box. It was Mabel as a child, sitting on a concrete stair with the doll in her lap. She was smiling, but her eyes were sad. On the back of the photo, a single handwritten phrase, "Not everything that burns is extinguished." That phrase lingered, because there were not just memories there. There was an old hidden flame beginning to ignite inside each of them. And that house, full of tapes and numbered objects, had much more to say. And the silent house, where the boxes were still scattered, Mabel's children sat once again around the old wooden table, now marked by time and the stories it carried. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the house itself bore the weight of decisions not made, secrets not revealed, and words suspended in the air for so long. The tape they had heard the day before had shaken everyone, especially James, Ruth, and Thomas, three different adults, united by blood ties and a past full of wounds. James seemed restless, a restlessness not born from impatience but from a silent weight pushing him toward confronting what he had so far preferred to ignore. He, who had always been the most rational, the most practical, now found himself struggling with feelings he didn't know how to express. Ruth, who had always been the family's emotional anchor, felt the tension pulsing in every word spoken, in every prolonged silence. Thomas, who rarely allowed himself to reveal his emotions, was there, visibly more present, as if the mother's inheritance had made him reborn for something greater than himself. While flipping through an old photo album, Ruth found a page with several images of Mabel's youth, a strong woman, but clearly marked by hardships. The oldest photo showed their mother smiling next to a serious-looking man, perhaps her father. Ruth ran her finger over the image, feeling a mix of longing and sadness. Have you ever wondered how many choices our mother made to protect us, and how many, in truth, were choices that left her alone? Ruth broke the silence, her voice light but firm. James sighed, looking at the ceiling. "I think we never really saw her completely. We always tried to fit her into our own expectations, but she was more complex than we imagined." Thomas nodded. "She carried so much without sharing it with us, maybe afraid of burdening us, but in the end, she isolated herself. And we, out of fear or pride, didn't reach her." Ruth took one of the open boxes and pulled out a letter yellowed by time, written in their mother's handwriting. The letter spoke about forgiveness, about open wounds, and about the importance of choosing to move forward without forgetting the past. "Forgiving is not forgetting but freeing oneself," Mabel wrote, as if leaving one last lesson for her children. The weight of those words fell heavily on them, awakening old memories of fights, silences, and resentments that had never been properly addressed. The disputes over the inheritance, the differences of opinion, the unspoken grievances, all of this now seemed like a burden heavier than the material goods. James broke the silence. "I always thought I had to be the strong one in the family, the one who solves everything. But I realized that strength alone is not enough. We need dialogue, real dialogue." Ruth agreed, her eyes teary. "We grew up around silence, and that pushed us apart more than it brought us together. Now, maybe it's time to break this cycle." Thomas looked at his siblings and said, "We can't change the past, but we can choose how it will influence our future. The weight of Mom's choices doesn't have to be our burden." At that moment, they all understood that the inventory was not just about old objects, tapes, and photos. It was an invitation for a new beginning, a chance to rescue what had been lost through years of pain and silence. Ruth suggested that together they start gathering the stories and the truth that Mabel never had the chance to fully tell. That they be more than heirs, that they be guardians of a legacy that included not only the pain, but also courage and hope. James proposed organizing monthly meetings with the grandchildren, so that their grandmother's story could be passed on with transparency and care. Thomas, in turn, spoke about wanting to look for their mother's old friends, people who might help fill in the gaps of the story. Day gave way to night. The house gained a new energy. It was no longer a place of suffocating memories, but the setting for a possible reconciliation. Mabel's children were ready to carry the weight of the choices, not as a burden, but as a responsibility to transform pain into understanding. That moment, James, Ruth, and Thomas began to realize that the real inventory they had received was Mabel's soul. A legacy that demanded courage to face difficult truths, empathy to welcome old wounds, and wisdom to build bridges where there had once been walls. And so, in that house marked by time, 3 children met not just as heirs, but as agents of change, determined to write together a new chapter where silence would be replaced by words, distance by embrace, and the weight of choices by the lightness of forgiveness. The house seemed to breathe a silent expectation as James, Ruth, and Thomas gathered once again around that old table. That day carried a different weight. There was something they had not yet explored, a mystery left by Mabel that lingered in the air like a shadow, a silent invitation to be unraveled. In the middle of the room rested the locked box, the only one that, until then, remained closed, holding secrets that not even the heirs dared to imagine. James stood still for a few minutes, looking at the box with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. That heavy piece, with its seal intact, was an enigma left behind, a silent challenge that seemed to ask to be opened, yet demanded respect at the same time. Ruth approached, examining the rusty lock. "Why do you think Mom left this box locked? What do you think she didn't want us to see?" she asked, a tremor of emotion in her voice. Thomas sat down, contemplative. Maybe because inside it there is something that would change everything. Or maybe it was something only she could understand until the end. Silence returned, heavy and full of expectation. After minutes that felt like hours, James finally decided they would open that box. But not before finding the key, hidden somewhere in the house, like a final test of their family bonds. As they searched for the key, the tension among them grew. It wasn't just the anxiety about what they might find, but the fear of what it would mean for each of them. Grandma Mabel's inventory was beginning to turn into a true journey of discoveries and revelations. Finally, Ruth, while rummaging through an old chest in the guest room, found a small wooden box with a tiny key inside. Her heart raced. "I found the key," she announced, and a silent relief swept through the group. With trembling hands, James fit the key into the lock and turned it slowly. The click of the box opening seemed to echo throughout the house. Inside, they found an aged paper envelope, carefully sealed with a red wax seal. It was a letter, the letter never delivered. Ruth gently took the envelope, as if holding a treasure, and slowly opened it. The handwriting was Mabel's, firm but filled with emotion. The letter began with a confession. Mabel had lived part of her life in secret, a story she never told her children for fear of the consequences. It revealed a forbidden love, a choice made in the name of protecting the family, and a deep regret for not having been able to open her heart at the right time. As Ruth read aloud, James and Thomas listened in silence, absorbing every word. In the letter, Mabel explained that during her youth, she had a relationship with a man who was not accepted by the community, and that this put her in intense conflict between her beliefs and her feelings. Because of this, she had made difficult decisions to preserve the family's stability, but those choices caused her to carry silent pain for decades. The revelation added a new dimension to Mabel's figure, no longer just the strong, reserved matriarch, but a vulnerable woman who sacrificed herself out of love and fear. The letter also included a plea for forgiveness, a supplication for her children to understand each other better, even in the face of faults and secrets. Thomas, who had remained silent until then, spoke for the first time with a voice filled with emotion. "I never imagined our mother went through something like this. She was braver than we thought, facing battles we didn't even know existed." James agreed, feeling the weight of the responsibility they now carried, not just over material goods, but over Mabel's emotional legacy. "We have to honor this, not just as children, but as guardians of the truth she finally managed to give us." Ruth looked at her siblings, her gaze steady. "This letter is a bridge, not just to the past, but to the future. We can choose how to move forward from here, with more understanding, more unity, more love." That night, the atmosphere in the house changed. The tensions that once seemed insurmountable began to dissolve, replaced by a feeling of relief and hope. Mabel's secret, kept for so long, brought forth not only wounds but also the possibility of healing. As they closed the box and carefully stored the letter, James, Ruth, and Thomas understood that this discovery was more than just a chapter in the inventory. It was an invitation to reconciliation, a call to face their own shadows and strengthen family bonds. The weight of Mabel's inheritance was beginning to transform. What once was only a burden now carried the seed of a new story, made of conscious choices, sincere forgiveness, and a love that could finally reveal itself in all its complexity. They knew the road ahead would not be easy. The past still held its shadows, unhealed wounds could hurt, and differences might resurface. But for the first time, they felt ready to walk together, not as strangers bound by blood, but as a family choosing to reunite. And so, with the locked box opened and the never-delivered letter finally revealed, Grandma Mabel's inventory showed its true meaning. More than belongings and objects, it was a journey of redemption, a call to the courage to live the truth, even when it seemed too difficult to face. That night brought a strange calm to Grandma Mabel's house, as if the weight of secrets had finally found a place to rest. James, Ruth, and Thomas remained seated in the living room, the open letter on the table between them, illuminated by the flickering light of the fireplace. They had already faced revelations that seemed insurmountable, but there was still something lingering in the air, the true purpose of the inventory that had brought them there. The next morning, as the sun streamed through the dusty windows, Ruth decided to explore one last compartment in Grandma's old desk. Opening a hidden drawer, she found a sealed envelope much older than the letter discovered in the box. The yellowed paper was fragile, but the handwriting they immediately recognized was Mabel's. It was a letter addressed to them, her children, but meant to be opened only after reading the never-delivered letter. With a racing heart, James took the envelope and read aloud. "Dear James, Ruth, and Thomas, if you are reading this, it means you already know my secret story, the pain I kept for so long. I write these words not only as a confession but as a final request, a last wish that surpasses any material possessions I have left behind." Mabel asked that, despite her difficult choices, they would not allow the conflicts of the past to define the family's future. She begged them to use the inventory as a bridge toward reconciliation, understanding, and healing. Mabel revealed that the objects left there, the photos, letters, the slightly burnt porcelain doll, and even the locked box, were symbols of her memories, struggles, and loves. She wished that, by preserving these memories, they would also cultivate forgiveness and hope among themselves. Thomas interrupted the reading, his voice choked with emotion. "She knew it would be hard, but trusted that we could do it. I never imagined this responsibility was so deep." Ruth nodded, holding her brother's hand. "It's more than an inventory of belongings. It's an inventory of her heart." James, who had been more reserved until then, opened the envelope and took out a small folded paper. It was a map, with notes and directions to a hidden place in the backyard, the place Mabel called the Garden of Truth. The map pointed to an old oak tree, the same one they had seen upon arriving but never explored closely. Driven by renewed curiosity, the three siblings followed the map to the oak tree. Beneath its roots, they found a small metal box, protected by earth and time. Inside, they discovered old photographs, diaries, and a small music box. Each object seemed to tell a part of Mabel's story that even the letter had failed to reveal. The photographs showed rare moments of Mabel's youth, moments of forbidden happiness, secret meetings, and laughter that defied fear and repression. The diaries contained personal accounts, her doubts, her dreams, and the strength she needed to stay strong in the face of the injustices and prejudices of that era. When opened, the music box played a soft melody, a song Mabel used to sing to soothe her children on difficult nights. With tears in her eyes, Ruth commented, "She wanted us to understand everything, that our story wasn't just pain, but also hope. That she always believed love could overcome the shadows." James agreed, feeling a lump in his throat. "And that we had to take care of each other, just like she took care of us, even when she didn't have the strength to say everything out loud." Thomas looked at the oak tree, as if it were a silent witness to their mother's life. "This legacy is not just for us. It's for future generations." So they know who Grandma Mabel was, a woman who fought, who loved, and who never gave up, even when the world seemed against her. Back at the house, the siblings spent the day together, organizing the objects, reading the diaries, and sharing stories that until then had only been kept in the fragmented memories of each one. The early tensions began to dissolve, replaced by a renewed sense of connection. As the sun set, James proposed something that seemed simple but deeply symbolic: to turn Grandma Mabel's house into a space of memory and gathering, where family members could learn about her story, her values, and the lessons she left behind. Ruth and Thomas enthusiastically agreed, realizing that the inventory was not just a list of belongings, but an invitation to perpetuate the love and courage that defined Mabel's life. That night, as they prepared to leave, James looked at his siblings and said, "She gave us more than a material inheritance. She gave us the chance to be a real family." Ruth smiled, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Now we understand that the weight of choices doesn't have to divide us, but can unite us. Thomas added, and that Grandma Mabel's true legacy is the strength to move forward, even when the past tries to hold us back. Grandma Mabel's house remained silent, holding its memories but also carrying the promise of a future where pain would give way to hope, and secrets to forgiveness. The inventory was complete, not in possessions, but in love, overcoming, and legacy. If Grandma Mabel's story touched your heart and you want to follow more deep stories about families, overcoming struggles, and revealed secrets, subscribe to the channel and join this journey with us.